It's the whole job of the whole church to preach the whole gospel to the whole world. That's a quote by famous revivalist Charles Spurgeon, and I absolutely love it because that's a big part of what this video is about. I'm Dr. John, and on behalf of the Leadership Network, I want to share with you about digital evangelism and specifically some steps that you can take to help people in your church become digital evangelists or digital missionaries, and then some things that you can do to equip a digital missions team at your church. And so, first of all, I want to say that relational evangelism has shown to be one of the best approaches to evangelism. And simply put, it sounds like what it actually is. It's evangelism that is based on a relationship first. And typically, we're really quick to want to invite people to our churches, and for a lot of different reasons. One, it's easier, right? It's easier. Let me just invite someone to my church, and then they can hear my pastor, enjoy the worship music, and we got great, gifts for first-time guests. And basically, I'll kind of pass off this responsibility to my church, and my church will take it from there. But going forward, if we're going to mobilize the people in our churches to have effective gospel conversations where they live, work, learn, and play, if we're going to help them see God move outside the building, we have to equip them to be able to do just that. And one of the things we have to do is to give them a tool to use that can help them. Now, is that there has got to be some work, I believe, in a lot of our contexts to kind of help our people get over some mental blocks. I mean, there are some paradigm shifts that are kind of slowing the mission down. And if we're honest, and I would say this, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, ask the people in your church, what prevents you from sharing Jesus? What prevents you from feeling comfortable sharing Jesus or having the confidence to share Jesus? Now, I'm going to share some shifts in this video that I think are necessary, but more specifically, I would encourage you to even just have some conversations and ask the people in your particular context where you get more specifics about what that looks like for you. One of the things that we're going to have to do is help people see themselves as missionaries. Right? One of the things that the Moravians believed is that every Christian is a missionary. The reality is that Jesus has sent each of us out with this message of reconciliation that Paul would call in 2 Corinthians 5 verses 19 and 20. We're ambassadors of Christ. But we got to help every one of the people in our church understand that. And it's one thing to invite friends and family to church, but it's a whole other thing to be ready to rock and roll in that moment that God has set you up to be in. So I want to share with you 5 shifts that I think we have to make to help our people engage the Great Commission in person and especially online. One shift is shifting from the main focus being weekend services to the main focus being the everyday interactions that they're having throughout the week. Right? As church staff, we put a lot of our energy and attention and time into making sure that our weekend services are amazing, that people can encounter God, experience great worship, a relevant message, great kids ministry, that they feel welcomed in a wonderful environment. But if our people are going to engage the Great Commission more frequently and more consistently to go and make disciples and to go into all the world and to share the message of Jesus, that'll be kind of Mark's version there. We got to help them take advantage of those opportunities out there. So we got to help them to shift. But although weekend services are amazing, the focus is what's happening Monday through Saturday. So what that also means is there's another shift to understand that people out in the world are more interested in your personal story because they know you than your pastor's sermon because they don't know the pastor. Right? And so we're typically quick to go, hey, you got to hear my pastor. But it's like, wait. Didn't God set you? God brought this person to you, not your pastor. God brought this person to you. So how can we help our people be equipped in those moments to take advantage of those opportunities that God is bringing to them in those moments? So they got to shift from, pastor sermons. No, maybe it's my personal story. And so that means the shift from the ordained to the ordinary, doing the work of the ministry. Sound like Ephesians 4? I think so, right? There's a belief that those who are ordained and trained and skilled, those are the ones who are the called people. But we got to help them understand, no, each of them are called to share the gospel. Like Charles Spurgeon says, it's the whole church's job to share the whole gospel, to preach the whole gospel. So that's the third shift we have to make from the work of the ministry being done from the ordained and shifting it to the ordinary or the everyday believers. And so with that in mind, then that leads us to the next shift, where Christians feel more confident and comfortable talking about Jesus first instead of talking about their church first. That'll change the nature and the outcome of a lot of conversations If more believers are talking about Jesus in those conversations than just jumping really quickly to talking about our churches. And some of them know more about our churches than they do know about Jesus, which makes the probability of them talking only about our churches and not about Jesus, and we can miss some opportunities. And so the more we help them shift to talking about Jesus first in those conversations, we could see some different outcomes there. Now, if people are just not confident, then absolutely invite them to church. But I think we got to do some more work there to help more of them talk about Jesus. I know there are times in my own life where I just feel like it was quicker. Just invite them to church. But then there are other times where I'm like, man, I really feel like God's wanting to do something else here. Like this is an assignment for me, not my pastor, not my ministry team, but for me. So how do we help our people be more comfortable and confident in those moments, taking advantage of those opportunities that God brings their way? Especially when we make the fifth shift from going through casual scrolling to intentional seeking, especially in digital ministry and digital evangelism. And so once that begins to happen, right, we go from just casual scrolling, like sometimes it's just mind numbing, like we need a break from the day, and we're just kind of scrolling through and we're seeing all kind of stuff. We choose to engage or not engage. We spend a lot of hours, on average 17 hours a week on social media, or and even more than that online. And most of the time we're not even thinking about the mission at all. Even if we see things pop up, we don't think that that's something for us to tackle or for us to engage. So that's one of the shifts that we have to make. And I think we'll be able to make that shift when we help people understand, we'll help people overcome what obstacles that are in their minds or in their hearts even, as we kind of discover what that is for the people in our context. But then when we do that, then they go, well, what do we do then? Then now we need to be able to hand them a tool. This will be the equipping piece. Hand them a tool to say, this is a good, simple framework to use. It's not a perfectly just step-by-step framework, right? Just every single time you go through these steps, because you might bounce around from different ones. These are principles in a framework that could go in sequence, but they might not go in the exact sequence. So first, let me share with you this, that it comes from a book that Dave and John Ferguson wrote called Bless. And Bless is a word that is an acronym, and each letter in that acronym stands for a different principle in this framework for relational evangelism. And this framework works online, but Jeff Reed and I, we wrote a book called Sharing Jesus Online, so we tweaked it just a little bit for online evangelism, or for digital evangelism. So first, let me say that the B stands for begin with prayer. Like, we want to begin everything with prayer. When we look at the ministry of Jesus, the night before he chose his disciples, he began with prayer. Many times in his days, he got up early and he began with prayer. And so in our own lives, we want to begin things with prayer, but specifically with evangelism, because we got to always remember that it's the Spirit of God who's leading us. Evangelism, it is a spiritual activity. It's a spiritual activity that we have been given we have been empowered by the Holy Spirit to carry out this spiritual activity that leads to spiritual fruit and spiritual results. And so because it's a spiritual thing, and we don't know it all, we've got to begin with prayer, so that it puts us in a place of humility, allowing the Holy Spirit to lead us, reminding us not to assume anything, but to submit to the leading and guiding of the Holy Spirit, because he is already at work in the minds of people and in the hearts of people. And so when we begin with prayer, it aligns the heart of the Christian in position with the Holy Spirit for him to lead us and guide us to who is the person that he's working on right now. And we'll be partnering with the Holy Spirit on what he wants us to say and do in that relationship and in that person's life. So we want to begin with prayer. And then when we begin with prayer, and somebody is identified to us, whether it's a name or a face we get while we're actually in prayer, or maybe we've prayed and as we are intentionally seeking online, a name pops up, or a conversation gets our attention, or there's a relationship that we've had for a while and now we see something a little different. And that could be us sensing that God's saying, this is the person I want you to begin to reach out to. And so when we start connecting with that person, we want to listen to them. So the B is always begin with prayer. The L is listening. Part of what listening looks like online is a little different than in person. Online, you can read a whole lot of chats and conversations and posts and things that people have shared. And so you're actually reading first in many contexts, not all. Like there are a lot of live platforms where people are talking, but for the most part, a lot of these online relationships are going to start with some kind of a chat and some kind of a news feed or some kind of a group where people are reading each other's messages and responding. And so typically what we're looking at online is going from social listening to active listening. Now, social listening is what a lot of companies do, organizations do, when they're looking online to see how they're being talked about. How is their brand being received? How are their messages being received? What are people's opinions? And so the social listening is reading and studying what is being said about you and your organization. And so for us, whether we know it or not, social listening is what we do. Say you're scrolling through real quick and you see something about Jesus or God, maybe especially if it's a celebrity or an athlete, you usually stop. But what they say, right? That's social listening. And so we do the same thing in whether it be a Facebook group or a chat or reading through the comments in a particular feed or video. What we're doing is social listening. And so what ends up happening is, as we're looking at what people are saying and we're social listening, some things can stand out and be highlighted to us that the Holy Spirit can prompt us to respond to, okay? And when that happens, now we're not just hanging out, just scrolling. Now we've identified someone, we've identified a conversation, and we're moving from social listening to active listening. Now we're asking open-ended questions that are not easily answered by yes or no, but questions that require some kind of an explanation, right? So instead of like, do you believe in God? Yes or no? Well, what do you believe about God? That's an open-ended question. Where did your thoughts about God come from? Or how are you doing? Like what's going on with you? I saw that you mentioned that you're having a hard time. What's happening there? What's going on? I'm concerned about what you said, and I would like to hear more. What's happening? And so in that listening phase, we are positioning ourselves again with humility to listen to what's going on with people, and through listening with people, we're actually loving them, and people feel seen, heard, valued, and that helps build relationships. And so the B is always begin with prayer. The L is listening, right? We want to move from social listening to active listening. And then the E. Now, originally, with Dave and John Ferguson's book, Bless, the E represented eating. But online, that doesn't work as well. Now, what we do know is that when you're eating a meal together and you're fellowshipping together, hanging out, sharing a meal, that builds connection. But think about what I just said, sharing a meal. And so online, there are opportunities to, you can eat. You can be on your Zoom screen. I'm on my Zoom screen. We're eating, but that's not quite the same. And that's not what the E means in an online blessed framework. The E for us means enjoying shared experiences, because online, that's what builds that connection. So instead of a shared meal, we're talking about shared experiences. So enjoying shared experiences. And so there are a lot of groups online where there's similar interests, where there's a group of people who are vegetarians, or a group of hikers, or fitness groups, or hunting groups, or moms groups, parents groups, dads groups, men's groups, all those kind of things, different interests where people are coming together and they're sharing their interests. But there are also ways that you can actually, if you think about like the gamer community, they are actually playing a game together, virtual reality, like they're in it and they're sharing a live experience together. And so look for ways to share experiences, and you can find what those are during the listening part, right? As you're listening to what people are talking about, you're also listening to what's something that they like to do that I like to do. What's something that I can invite them to, some kind of group, some kind of activity, some kind of whatever that we are involved in. That might not be a church event yet, but something even online that we can connect to, okay? So that's the E, enjoying shared experiences. So after you've begun with prayer, and I would also say on a side note, you want to continue with prayer. It's not just a step at the beginning, it's all throughout. So we want to begin with prayer, we want to listen to people, we want to enjoy shared experiences, and when we do that, we're going to also find some ways that we can serve them. We want to serve as Christ has served us. He in humility, he came in Mark 10:45, where he says the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but he came to serve. And in John 13, we see him washing the disciples' feet, a position of humble servanthood. And so we want to look at how can we serve people. Again, in building these relationships, serving people is one way that we're able to do that. People's hearts open up as you serve them. It's very humbling to be served by someone. And like I said, the hearts open, walls come down because they feel honored, seen, loved, valued, cherished, significant. And that again builds that relational connection that is part of relational evangelism. And so online, there are things you can do like, I know when my wife and I had our third child, we had moved away from a place that we had most of our relationships, most of our family and friends. Even though we had moved away, a friend of ours sent us a meal through DoorDash. So imagine our surprise when a meal came to our door because someone used their app to minister to us, to serve us. And that's just one example of a lot of different ways that serving people can happen online. And so, and then finally, sharing your story. Okay. So again, we step back and look at the full framework of relational evangelism. Begin with prayer, listen, enjoy shared experiences. We want to serve them, and then we want to share our story with Jesus. We want to share how he has impacted us. What was our before and after like? What was our encounter with Jesus like? Because see, at this point, the door can be wide open for us because again, now people know that we care. Now they're going to care about what we know. And in moments in people's lives, there are times where they're even more open to hearing Jesus than others. When they're going through challenging times, challenging situations, some of those experiences that we would call, valley kind of experiences, where it's really helpful to have somebody walk with them through those and listen to them and serve them and meet their needs and pray. Those are valuable, valuable moments. And so like I was saying before, people want to hear your story. And so what we encourage people to do is to take some time to write out your story. Sometimes we hesitate in sharing our story because we haven't shared it before. We don't even know, if we're caught in the moment to the idea of sharing our story, it can be overwhelming. There's so many things to talk about. I don't know what to say in this moment. Well, take some time to think about your story and what you would share. What was your before like? What was your encounter with Jesus like? How has your life with Jesus been afterwards? And so in an online space, it could be helpful to even have some of that already typed up. And so if you're connected with someone online, you can just copy and paste and send it to them when the time is right. Or it could be something that you share in a video chat. But one of the things that we want to talk about doing in this, using this principle and this framework, is how there could be times where because we're online, there is more of a public forum where you might meet people. You want to move from a public forum to a more private setting. And so maybe from a public chat and say, hey, is it okay if I send you a direct message? And now you're in more of a one-on-one kind of context where you can get a bit more personal. And most platforms today have options where you can go from the chat and just click a button and now it's a video chat. So set up a meeting to do a video chat or a phone call. You can even do audio on a lot of platforms as well. But my point is that there could be a progression from a public forum or a public chat to you being intentional. Go, man, I think we're connecting here. Let me, hey, I just sent you a message. You want to check it out? Let's connect. Like, I want to talk more about what you mentioned here. But if you wouldn't mind, let's just chat personally. So now you're in a direct messaging back and forth. And maybe in those comments, you're sharing an email or a video chat. And like I said, because a video chat, you don't necessarily need to share your phone number if you're uncomfortable doing that. But the apps themselves, the platforms themselves, allow many of them those kind of opportunities. And if not, then you can shift to another one that does, and then still have some privacy that's maintained either for them or for you. And at some point, this is how you can just continue the conversation going on and see what else God is wanting to do and to see done there. But now I want to take a few moments to talk about some ways that you can develop a digital missions team. Now, let me say this though. The bigger picture is we want to see everyone mobilized as missionaries in your church. So this tool can be used for everyone in your church. And so as you cast vision for what you want to see happen online, some people even then will kind of come up and talk about, hey, I want to be able to do that. But then also the shoulder tap method. Look at some specific people. Have a meeting plan where all those people can come together, and then kind of share your heart and your vision for the opportunities that you see online, but also hear from them, right? So they can get some buy-in from the very beginning on what that vision should look like, what the possibilities are, and then hear from them. How do you want to help us? Do you want to create social media graphics? Do you want to do lives? Do you want to follow up with people? Do you want to, talk about apologetics when that thing pops up? Can we forward people to you with that? I mean, talk about ways that they can identify what role that they want to participate in, and then lock them in. Map out a plan. And then map out a plan for what you want to do as far as your rollout. What are the first things that you want to do going forward? And then how are you going to execute that? And then how are you going to measure that? And so that's just a brief framework of some action steps that you can take to develop a digital missions team at your church. I believe that there's probably 3 people who are already online quite a bit who would love to help you out with that. They just don't know that you're interested in even using those gifts in this particular area. All right. So in short, we've talked about relational evangelism and what that means online, doing digital evangelism in a relational way. We talked about some shifts that can help people in your church re-engage the Great Commission. And we talked about 5 principles from a framework called Bless that Christians can use to evangelize online. And then we looked at a few steps that you can use to develop a digital missions team. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I am just grateful for the opportunity to be a part of what God is doing all around the world through people like yourself, in person and online. God bless you, and thanks for watching.